should tell us about your Lego set now that
Oh yeah,
now that it's
Legos.
live.
Greetings everyone, and thanks for joining today's webinar. We're going to cover getting the most out of your Modus files, deliverables, and documentations. My name is Patrick Higaki. I run the sales team here at Modus, as well as human interfacing, so anything that involves talking to people.
That
Joining me
sounded
today,
really natural.
yeah, natural. Human interfacing. I am a robot. Joining me today is Ken Bruick, one of our co-founders, who will be presenting, as well as Riley Peart, client services coordinator, helping out with Q&A and all the fun stuff we're going to cover today. If you have questions as we're going through this, please do use either the chat or the Q&A section of the webinar. Uh-oh. Jacob says, people. Yeah, people are overrated. It's true. We are going to dive right into things because we've got a lot to cover, and we want to make sure we get everybody out of class on time today. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Ken and let him take the stage.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to pick up right where we left off from last week's webinar, where we built this project. And it's not a great project, but that's okay. I might just add like a couple of things in here just to dress it up just a little bit, so it's just ever so slightly less sad. And I'm going to add an outlet or two just for fun. Okay. All right. So now this looks sort of like a real-ish room. Okay, so we're going to go through 4 things today. First, we're going to cover photo mode, just generating some renders. Then we'll cover 360 mode, generating those panoramic look around the room, online hosted things. Then we'll generate a bill of materials, and then we'll finish on line drawings. And as always, please don't hold questions till the end. Ask them as they come to you, and then Patrick and Riley will do a good job of interrupting me when it makes sense to cover that right then, or they'll keep track and bring us back to them later. Okay, so, oh, and we need to add some art in the back because this is just super boring. There, okay. Perfect. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is switch over to photo mode. So you can do that through this dropdown, or you can hit Control 1, 2, or 3, respectively, to go between design, photo, and 360. Once you come over to photo mode, you'll notice the options on the left change just a little bit. A lot of them are still here, but we no longer have the ability to add objects or change their properties. That is really design functionality. So everything else is around presentation. And then we added a new tab called camera. And so before we get to the camera settings, just really quickly up here at the top, there's also some other changes. We now have 2 navigation modes. We have fly and walk. All walk does is keep you at a static height. So even if I'm looking up and I push forward, I still stay at that height. And this is like a 5'10"-ish type person. But this is really handy if you just want to be able to show what the perspective is going to be like from somebody standing. I'll keep it in fly mode for now. All right, so the purpose of photo mode is just to generate some images. So almost the same thing as just grabbing a screenshot, although it does a little bit more processing on the light. When we come to the camera settings here, this has nothing to do with any cameras that might be embedded in your project. This is about the rendering camera, or the perspective that we are looking at things right now. And we have 2 options here that are pretty important. One is zoom. And so this is just classic camera functionality, depending on the effect you're going to go for. If you zoom in, it has kind of a flattening effect. But if you kind of go to the default, it looks nice. But then if you go all the way to the far end, you start getting kind of that fisheye lens type of scenario. And then focus range. Let me actually jump back to design mode. Again, that's Control 1. And I'm just going to add a controller. And what did we add here last time? Was that a Vadio? Okay, well, let's just keep mixing up all of the families. Let's put an HP controller on here just to make sure that no 2 brands are the same. Jumping back to photo mode, Control 2, where we can start to see this focus range really start to matter. So basically, this is controlling depth of field, if you're familiar with that camera term. And so the camera in photo mode automatically focuses on whatever is on the center of the screen, and then anything outside of that will be blurred based on distance from that point. So this is a little bit exaggerated, but does give you an idea of how you could kind of do a dramatic shot if you wanted to have some documentation calling out a specific product. Depth of field is a great way to make things look a little bit more artistic, but also control the user's focus. So let's say we really like this shot. Maybe just as we did before, we want to have some people in seats here. And once we're happy with it, it's now time to generate a render. To do that, I just click the Create Image button, or I can press the Enter key. Before I do that this time, I'm going to jump into the render settings. So render settings look an awful lot like the viewport settings in the top right corner. And this is an important distinction within Modus. You have your viewport settings, which control how things look while you are working in the environment. And then you have your render settings, which control the quality of the output images that you can generate. And so if you are, especially if you're on a lower end machine or even a medium power machine, it's not uncommon to have your viewport settings lower, but then still have your render settings cranked up. So that way you can have good performance while you're working, but then rendering, hey, it's okay if that takes 10 or 20 seconds. So for render settings, I've got these cranked all the way up. Format, you can choose between JPEG and PNG. There's actually a bug in the 2.0 release that forces all images to output as PNG, but that'll be fixed in an upcoming release. And then you can choose your resolution. You can go all the way up to 8K. I'm going to keep it at 1080. There's really no benefit of rendering at a higher resolution unless you actually need it. And then we have a couple options here for stability. So these are not as intuitive as I might hope, but I'll share what they do and why you might want to use them. So chunk size is basically a way of breaking up the render. So if you're doing a really high resolution render, like 8K, for example, if you set the chunk size to 4K, to generate an 8K image, it's going to do 4 chunks. So basically breaks up the rendering so your computer uses fewer resources during that render. If I shrink the chunk size to like 1K, that means we're going to have a whole bunch of chunks created. So basically tiles the image and renders them one at a time. So the cost benefit here, the larger the chunk size, the faster it's going to go, but it's also less stable. So if you don't have a machine with a lot of video RAM, it's very likely that you will run out of resources during the render and your machine will crash. So if you are running into crashing, bring this number down. And then the second one is use system RAM when available. So similar to the above chunk size option, if your machine is crashing and you're running out of video RAM, which is usually why you would crash, you're running out of video RAM, you can tell Modus to also use your system RAM. So maybe you have an 8 gigabyte video card, but you also have 32 gigs of system RAM. This will let Modus access that memory from your system. Again, the downside here is it's going to take a little bit longer, but this is a great toggle if you're running into stability issues. So basically my rule of thumb is save your project before you render, have these things cranked all the way up if you can, try a render, and if it fails, bring it back down. Okay, so now that I have this all set up as an 1080 JPEG, if I'm happy with my shot, click the button and it outputs a JPEG here. And that just shows up on my computer. If I click view, it'll take me to it. Now, this process is really easy for all the others. So I'm just going to press enter instead of using the UI to generate some more images. There's a couple other handy little things in Modus Photo. If I click on a camera, it immediately takes me to that view. And again, I can create a render here. I can also click on any chair to immediately jump to that perspective and then press enter. And so in just a few seconds, we've managed to create a handful of really nice renders. And that's it. Like there's just not a whole lot to it, which is a good thing. We want it to be nice and fast. So quick check-in before we move on to 360s. Patrick and Riley, do we have any questions that we wanted to tackle?
None as of this moment.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
one about Revit import and export, but
okay, we'll get to that one. We'll cover that one more towards the end. If you guys would help me remember, since that's a little off topic from what we're showing.
Perfect.
Okay, let's jump over to 360. So again, up here in the top left, or you could click Control 3. This one has even fewer options. So we can still show and hide things like we could before. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go back to photo and show one thing that is really cool that I don't know that everyone is aware of that you can do. And that is creating isometric-like renders. So I'm going to actually, I'll do this in design mode. I'm going to select the ceiling, press Control H to hide it, select this wall, Control H, and select this wall, Control H. And then I'm going to go to my project settings, change the location to white. I might change this window to not be transparent just so it looks a little bit nicer there. And I'm going to adjust my lighting here. And now we have a really nice isometric view. When we come back to photo, this is a great example of where you might want to crank in your zoom and then back out, and that gives you a nice isometric-like view. It minimizes the amount of perspective, and if I hit enter, we get that awesome looking image. Cool. Okay, I really want to show that because I think that's a really great way to present projects, and you haven't been able to do that for super long, so there's probably a lot of you that aren't aware that you can even do that. All right, let me bring all these things back, and then we'll head over to 360. Okay, now for 360 mode, we lose the option to control the camera. And there's a couple reasons for this. Well, one reason, and that's because in a 360, you don't want depth of field, you don't want things out of focus, and you don't want zoom because the user's in control of that once they are viewing the 360. So you still have all of the other same controls in terms of lighting and having media playing on the screen, but you don't really need anything else. And let's just for fun change this to, we'll change it back to a front row room. Okay, great. The 360, when you generate a 360, similar workflow, you position the camera where you want it. 360s also have their own render settings. So these are separate settings from the viewport. They are also separate settings from photo rendering. So overall quality, I've got this just set to very high. 360s take longer to render. And resolution, we don't let you directly control the resolution because with 360s, it doesn't really make sense. But the higher the resolution, the slower the renders get by quite a bit. So I'm going to keep resolution at medium so that you guys aren't watching it generate a render for a really long time. Quality at very high. I'm going to press OK. Now, a couple things with 360s. So keep in mind where this camera is where the audience will view things. So it's often good to get in position and then just kind of look around the room and see if that looks good. I've seen a lot of 360s where they end up being partially in somebody's head or maybe too close to the table and the camera clips below it. So you just want to kind of really quickly double check that you're in a good spot, look around, and then the direction you are facing when you capture the 360 is the default direction people will see this room when they load your 360. So it's important to keep that in mind as well. And I'm going to press 360 here. It's going to render. And again, I had it on medium resolution. So the output here is not going to be quite as high resolution as it could be, but it'll still look pretty nice. And I'm going to toss this into, I'm going to have Patrick and Riley toss this into chat here so that all of you can open it up. But I'm also going to show it on my screen. So I've just pulled up my web browser here. By default, when you create a 360, a couple of things are going to happen. One, it's going to use your settings for showing a logo and showing the file name, and we'll get to how you configure that in just a moment. Other than that, this is just what happens. It's really quick and easy to throw together. So again, put yourself in the shoes of a client who is maybe having a hard time putting the whole picture together. You can just drop one of these into a chat really quick, and they're going to be pretty darn excited about what they can see. Okay, so before we get into how we manage that, so I'm actually going to exit Modus here. Do we have any questions on that process? It was really quick, really easy. I don't imagine we have many. Okay, all right. So I'm going to jump over to the launcher here. And the important part about 360s is these are not things that are hosted locally on your machine. These are hosted on the internet. So when you generate a 360, we're doing not just all the rendering, but also uploading it to our cloud and hosting it online. So that means that there's nothing to manage on your file system. And if you go to look to where it was created, you're not going to find it on your hard drive anywhere. What you do is you go to the launcher and you come over to 360s, and starting in the top left is going to be the most recently generated one. If you want to rename your 360, you just right click and do rename, and we'll call this newer webinar, because I have a previous one right there also called webinar. And then we have a few options on the right. So the first one is view online. That just pulls up a web browser. We also have show title and show logo. If you have these options set up, you'll be able to change these. If not, you'll need to go into settings, which we'll cover in just a moment. And then we have a few options here. The first one is URL. This is the exact same URL as view online. We also have some embed code. So this embed code is really basic HTML. It just basically creates an iframe if you're familiar with HTML. But you use that so that you could embed the 360 in your own website, or if perhaps you're using some web generation tool for proposals or something like that. That's what that code does. So it couldn't be any simpler. The third option here is DTools. So if you are a DTools cloud user, when you're generating a cloud proposal in the DTools software, there is an option to add a Modus 360 in. And if you hover over it, it'll give you some steps. So I don't know how well that's going to show up over the webinar, but in my tooltip, it gives 3 steps to do it. So it's pretty quick and easy. A more recent addition here. Man, my computer just froze. So bear with me for a moment. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. There we go. Okay. I am now unfrozen. We also recently added this option to download the image. And so if I click on this, it's going to ask me where I want to save it. And I'm going to, you can't see this yet, but here we go. So I've just navigated to this. This is what the source image of a 360 looks like. So it's not super useful on its own. You really want to toss it into a viewer. But we have had a lot of customers that either want to host 360s on their own, or they simply want to have a backup, or maybe they're doing a sensitive project and they're not even allowed to host this on some external cloud. This is a great option for you. You can download the image and then use any viewer that supports equirectangular panoramic images. We use Penellum. Riley and Patrick, do you guys want to put a link to Penellum into chat just so they can find it? Anyway, that's how you would do that, is through image only. Hey, one fun thing that we added in Modus 2 is crash recovery, and I crashed during the webinar, and now Modus is asking me if I want to restart that session. Thankfully, I do not, because we have everything we need. Okay. All right, so that's it for 360s. Managing them is pretty easy. One last thing, though, I do want to go to the settings for these. If you come to settings and then 360 images, you've got a few options for configuration here. You can add your own logo. We strongly recommend doing a PNG so that it does not cover like a big block on your 360 image. If you add a URL here, when you click the logo, it will take people to that URL. So this can become a nice little marketing thing. And then you have some defaults here. This basically says anytime you create a new 360, do you want to show the title by default, and do you want to show the logo by default? That can be overridden on a per 360 basis with these little toggles here and here, but that's it. It's pretty simple and straightforward. Okay, and that's it for 360s. We're going to move through all this stuff pretty quick because these are designed to be quick and easy. Okay, next thing on the list is bill of materials. And so this is kind of an awkward but hidden gem inside Modus because you can't get to these by running Modus. You can only get to them through the launcher. Over time, these are actually going to come into Modus 2. Having them in the launcher is a byproduct of the VR-only days where there was no other environment where you could do things with a mouse and keyboard. So for now, they're here. I hope before too long they will be inside Modus. So to get to bill of materials or line drawings, you need to enter Modus Docs. To do that, you first select your project, which in our case is the webinar.modus file, and then you click Docs instead of launching Modus. This gives you two options: generate line drawings, which will end on, or generate bill of materials. And we're going to do bill of materials first because it is really simple and kind of boring. There's just not a whole lot to it. And this is a two-step process. So the first step is filtering out the content that you do not want included in the bill of materials. So with Modus, as you know, you might have windows, you might have lights, you might have plants and outlets and things that you're just not selling, but you needed to have in the project. And so by default, we do our best to filter those things out. Anything name brand is typically included, and any electronics, even if they're generic, are typically included. But the good news is you have the freedom to mix and match however you want. So for example, in this project, I had the Herman Miller Setu chairs in there. Since they're name brand, they were included, but perhaps the customer already had those and I want to exclude them. I simply hover over it and click the X, and it now shows up in the list over here. But perhaps we're actually selling the lighting. Maybe this is actually a lighting kit and we've sold them on the value there and we want that included. I come over to the excluded objects and click the check mark, and now it appears. And that's it for filtering the list. Once we're happy with everything as it's set up, we then move to the generate bill of materials step. And this gives us a preview of what the actual data will look like. And when we're done, it outputs a CSV file. But inside that CSV, we're going to see the product name, brand, description, dimensions, and quantity. The description here is important because it's not just a product description, it's a description of what things you've configured inside Modus. So for example, on this Team Connect ceiling mic, we're not using the flush mount, for example, and so that was an important detail. Or on the salamander trapezoid table, it tells us the finishes we've picked. So that's the level of detail that you can expect. Notably, Modus doesn't do anything with cables, so we're not mentioning cables or labor or anything like that. This CSV is really there to represent what was added into the Modus project so that you can then take this to the next step. So this is where you can start to bring it into your proposal tool and say, hey, yeah, here are the things we've added. What is needed to then support all of this? Once you're done, you click Generate CSV File. It's going to ask you where you want to put it. And I'm not going to force you guys to watch me open Excel and look at a spreadsheet that has the same data. But hopefully you can imagine it's exactly like this. And that's it for bill of material. It's really quick and easy. A nice hidden gem. Okay, now let's jump over to line drawings. So line drawings are super cool. So again, I go to Docs from the launcher and click Generate Line Drawings. And I have not touched this project since the webinar. So there is nothing, there's no secrets that I've done. I haven't done anything to prep this file. This is just how it comes based on what we built. And so in this initial view, so this is a three-step process. The first step is where we set up our views, our elevations, then we can annotate, and then we generate the drawings. In this first view, we have this hybrid view where we have these rectangles. These are actually from the reflected ceiling view. Then we also have the table and chairs, the plant, our front wall, all of that. And then it also automatically generates a floor and ceiling view for us. We don't preview those here. We'll do those in the next step. But let's say that we wanted to create a front wall elevation. How do we do that? First step is click this camera button. And that gives us a new camera, this blue rectangle, and then some controls for adjusting this view. And as you look on the left side here, we're going to see a thumbnail preview of what will be output for this view. So the very first thing I want to do is call this front wall, press enter, and Okay, so our options here are we can grab these handles to basically widen the view. So if we wanted to get this whole sidewall, we could do that. If we want to rotate the view, we grab these handles. And then this little arrow lets us move the camera in and out without accidentally changing it. And that's all great. Those are good ways to be able to do this. But there is a faster way to make the camera align to the wall, and that is by holding Control. So if I hold Control while I move this camera around, it is going to just snap to the closest wall it finds. And in this particular case, we want it to snap to the front wall. But let's say I wanted to create a duplicate view of this, because sometimes it's handy to see just the front wall, but sometimes it's also handy to see that in the context of table height and chairs. So if I hold Alt and click and drag on this arrow, just like in Modus, it'll create a duplicate. And now we see that we have two views here, front wall and then a second one with front wall, table, and chairs. And I'm not going to bother naming these. Hopefully you get that. Now, the cool thing is I can hold Control and Alt to both create a duplicate and align this to the wall. I can do that again for the right side, and that gives us 5 views, basically 5 elevations plus floor and ceiling. And that's pretty good for us to get started. So now let's jump over to the annotate stage. So I'll show you this just on the front wall, but we could do it on any of them and it's all the same. But here's a nice view of the view with chairs in it. Okay, so from here we can just add notes wherever we want. You simply click and add a note. Resize it. Cool. Now, from here, we can also drag a line off of this blue border and connect it to things. And as I'm hovering around, you'll see kind of a green highlight and then a slightly darker green border around objects. If I just release this arrow at any point, this note is just kind of freely floating in space. But if I attach this arrow to one of the edges of a green box, or specifically to a point on a green box, that adds some interesting behavior. That actually snaps this line to that green box. So if we were to go back into Modus, so let's say we save our project. I went back into Modus and I moved this display or resized this display, this arrow line would stay pinned to that corner because when I drew that arrow, it attached to the green box. So that's a really handy little feature there that helps speed up multiple revisions of notes. Similar things apply to dimensions. So I can click between any two arbitrary points and that'll just give me a line, which is only somewhat useful. But more important, I could, for example, click on this camera and then snap it to the floor. And not only does this give me a dimension line, because it snapped, because it anchored to both of those green boxes, if I were to go back into Modus and let's say adjust the camera height, this value would automatically update the next time I came into line drawings. And so this is a really cool, powerful feature for speeding up not just generation of line drawings, but regeneration of line drawings as the project evolves. But keep in mind, we can only do so much, right? If you moved this camera to a different wall entirely, our ability to maintain that dimension line is pretty limited. So it works for smaller adjustments, but if you're doing anything major, you'll probably need to come back and redraw a couple of lines. So if we're happy with all of this, let's say we've annotated all of our different pages and everything, then we come to our final step, generate drawings. And so here we give it a project name. I'm going to just call it webinar, an exclamation mark. It tells us the number of pages. By default, we're not including that hybrid floor and ceiling view. That really has limited utility, but we are automatically generating a floor and ceiling view. Let's say upon review, we realize we don't really need that wall that's entirely glass, so we'll remove that from the document. You can set up your footer settings inside settings, and you click generate drawings. Really quick, line drawing settings are basically setting up your page size, what image you want to appear in the bottom left corner, and address information. Now, the reality here is line drawings are generally not intended to be customer facing. Really, the intent of these is to give your engineering team or your CAD team a head start, so they're not starting from scratch. So they can already see all the decisions that were made in Modus and hit the ground running. So I'm going to click generate drawings. We'll just call this webinar PDF. It's going to export, and it showed up on a second window here. And now we get this multi-page PDF that has all of everything we asked for in it. A couple interesting things here. This is all vector art. So as we, how to pan around in Acrobat. As we pan around and zoom in, these images are not drawn with pixels, they're drawn with vector lines. So as you zoom, they stay sharp. If you were to import this into AutoCAD, for example, it would still look nice, it would still be workable. Speaking of importing it into CAD, we also include a scale line. So AutoCAD and similar tools have a really nice workflow where you bring in a document and you say, hey, what is my known dimension? And boom, you can do that really quickly and easily here. So it plays well. But if you need to send this to someone that does not have AutoCAD, we do export this in PDF so that it's very approachable by pretty much anybody with a computer. Okay, so I think that's about it for line drawings as well. I'll pause there. Do we have any questions on any of the deliverables, photos, 360, bill of material, or line drawings? And if not, we can jump over to off-topic questions.
There was a question about exporting to DWG. I did answer it in chat, but maybe you want to explain our philosophy there.
Yeah, we have appetite to do it. A long time ago, we actually did. The reason we stopped was we got almost all the same benefits out of PDF that we could get out of DWG. But we're open to bringing it back if there's real value there. We would probably strip out a lot of this stuff, and I need to review the DWG spec because I believe it technically does not support multi-page, which was one of the reasons we looked at it, but I can't. I need to check it and see if that's still true.
And then a follow-up question about drawings. Sorry, I missed it. How do we get to these file edit drawing sections pages? So if you could just show how to get to the annotation side. I think that's what he's asking about. Or maybe
just this page or line drawings in general?
I think just the editing.
Okay. So
I'll wait. Oh, from Modus main. Nope, sorry. How do you get there from the beginning?
Yes. So and this is not your fault. Like this is all a byproduct of the Modus VR days where all we were was a VR tool, and then we needed to add these 2D things. So these tools all existed outside of the main executable. They only lived in the launcher, and that's why they're very easy to miss, and that'll change over time. But basically, from the launcher, so I'm not in Modus, I'm just in the launcher, you select your project, and then you come over to Docs. And then when you click on Docs, it gives you an option to generate line drawings or a bill of materials. And so from there, that...
Uh-oh. Ken just froze. Did he freeze for you as well, Riley? It's a good, yep, and forbidden information. I was not fully paying attention to what he was talking through, so I don't know how to carry that conversation, but he is messaging in chat elsewhere.
Okay.
He blue screened, excellent. So I didn't.
Pull it up?
If you want to carry on that conversation, yep. he's calling it for himself, so.
Okay. Let me pull up. Oh, I rolled back and rolled forward, and now I've got to update.
Uh-oh. Oh, you got to update your DLCs.
Yeah.
Did want to touch on one thing. I was actually typing a response to a question that popped up earlier from Mark regarding the chunk size missing. So the reason for that, I'm just pushing enter, Mark, is that your machine is forcing DirectX 11 is our working theory. So if you have a lower spec machine, especially one with an Intel integrated graphics card, it will very likely not support DirectX 12. And DirectX 11 does not support the chunk-based rendering. Are you good to go, Riley?
I'm still downloading.
Still downloading. All right.
Watching this go up.
So hopefully, Mark, that was enough explanation on how to get there. I know that Ken was talking about the fact that Modus used to be a VR platform, and so to do things like documentation, you couldn't really do it in VR, so you had to go back to the launcher. Our long-term plan is to merge the things that are in the launcher into the actual Modus application long-term, not anything immediate.
All right.
Are you good to go?
I am.
Okay.
Right.
I'm going to spotlight you. And then we're also very close to being wrapped up here. So please feel free to get those questions in so we can answer them. Riley is going to go ahead and finish up the documentation.
All right. Docs. So as we were heading over to line drawings just in case we lost where we were before.
Ken's back.
Generate line drawings.
Hi, Ken.
Man.
And then if you need to add views, it's up here. We've got some hotkeys over here for you to use. Got Control to face it nearest the wall, or Alt will make a copy. So, just a quick review how to get there.
All right. Ken, did you wanna go back into the driver's seat, or I know we're at time right now, so are we
Man,
at
I'm
time?
afraid to do anything.
Understood.
My computer is unhappy today, apparently. I wasn't even doing anything hard.
I think our scheduled window actually goes to the quarter of the hour, but I think you cruise through everything pretty rapidly. Yeah. So we can do Q&A at this point.
Yeah.
I did want to also mention we have another training on Thursday. Ooh, is it possible to capture designer vector-based image? Ooh, that's an interesting one from Wes. Ken, do you want to field that one?
It is not possible today, but it is within the realm of possibility tomorrow. So I'll add that. I'm super curious. The use case for that. Like, I'd love doing stylized stuff, but I'm always afraid that I would waste people's time by adding it. But yeah, if you can share like some background on what you would hope to accomplish with that, I'm very interested.
And then there's another question, not really a question, but maybe a feature request from Ben Forrester. Would be great to configure a doc export once to apply to multiple Modus projects. Also, auto-applying dimensions to elevations would save time from adding them one by one.
Yeah, there's a lot of room to improve dimensioning. I think what we would do is make it so adding dimensions is faster, but still probably not fully automatic. Only because you may not want to actually dimension everything on every single page. I think you would end up spending just as much time removing redundant dimension lines as you would adding them. But Ben, if you have ideas on how we might automate that in a non-crazy way, I'm all ears. Okay.
Let's see. Uh-oh. Someone's joining. Last minute joiner. Bob. Excellent. So a couple other things. So Ken, we had a question early on about missing chunk size setting, and you may have had the answer to this. We just didn't ask in line. Sounds like he's on DirectX 11. So that is a feature that you can override, but if your machine can't support DirectX 12, I don't know what'll happen. Will Modus crash and then automatically force DirectX 11?
Yeah. It just won't. It won't load. And that's
Bob was here earlier.
We don't force DirectX 11 to be mean. It's just whether or not the hardware supports the underlining rendering features that are required. So there's not a whole lot we can do there.
Excellent. So take a moment to also mention our next training on Thursday, which is the advanced training. So we've broken our training into 3 separate sessions now, and we'll have a 4th one soon as well with our next release. So if you are getting a lot out of these trainings, or even if you're not, the last of the series trainings, training number 3 is maximizing Modus 2's features, advanced features. This one's a deep dive into certain things that you may not be doing in the box. So custom images, custom assets, as well as floor plan editor, etc. Plugging your computer into 240 volts would probably fix the problem. That is not an official position of Modus, but please
It's an unsupported configuration, but yeah.
please record it and put it on YouTube and have a fire extinguisher nearby because it would probably be interesting. Yes, you can do anything once. There was an early question about Revit export, and maybe we have time to get back to that. We had about 5 minutes.
Oh yeah, was it export or import?
It was both.
Both.
It was sort of, so I
Okay.
actually missed this and I apologize. I didn't realize you guys were asking questions as comments to my initial question. So first question was, is there a pathway to have Revit files come out of the renderings and alternatively bring in Revit rendering to build off of that as a project that is progressing?
So getting Revit into Modus is far more plausible than getting Modus into Revit. Revit import is something we've been working on for quite some time. And that will, well, I can confidently say that will show up at some point. Getting it out of Modus is much harder for a couple of reasons. One, we have just some IP challenges there in terms of what manufacturers have shared with us and their hesitance to let us share it with anyone else. But also, just exporting anything to Revit is not as easy as I would like. If we could figure out all of the intellectual property issues, then it becomes maybe possible. It wouldn't be native Revit, and they would all be untextured. And like that may or may not be a big deal, but for us, that is like a hard line in the sand from a technical standpoint. Our materials pipeline it's too unique to play well with any other system.
Excellent.
That was probably a much longer, deeper answer than they were looking for. A simple no probably would have sufficed, but here we are.
All right, I'll just leave it at no next time. No, I think it's good to kind of explain the reasoning behind it. It certainly is not lack of appetite on our end to have compatibility with Autodesk Revit. Like Ken said, there's some technical challenges behind the reasoning. So with that, a couple quick things to add. Please make sure that you are on the latest version of Modus. I did not do a quick check to see who's using old versions, but here is a perpetual link you can always use. Maybe bookmark that one. It will always put you on the most recent build of Modus 2. That thing is really, really important because we do have some users that are on ancient builds of Modus 2 that we've got lots of bug fixes that we've done over the last 6+ months. And we'll have a new release coming out soon as well. So we'll certainly update you via the launcher, but this link is always the best place to make sure you're getting the most current version of Modus. With that, read through this real quick. Realistically, we're looking to attempt to bring in a Revit file to save some time building out spaces. Yep, that's definitely on our radar. So certainly something, as Ken mentioned, much easier than exporting back to Revit. So hopefully we'll have some progress on that. Jacob, maybe if you want, send me an email directly and we can talk through some of that stuff. Yeah, 7th floor project.
Been there.
I think one of the things that we need for this to continue making progress is some good sample files. So if you have any that are not covered under an NDA, or if we need to sign an NDA with you to get access, just having some sample files so that we can see what importing a 7-story building looks like in terms. You might hate for asking that. No, there's no such thing as too much data, right? So it's good for us to have some samples though, because we definitely want to work on that side of things. Revit import is important. We've found that it's a mixture between people who have Revit or just want to have the ability to bring in Revit. So if you have sample files, that would be helpful for our R&D purposes. So with that, thank you all for joining. I'll stick around for a few more minutes just to see if there's any questions that pop up in chat. But as promised, we wanted to make sure everybody gets released on time, and we are right at the 45-minute mark. So thank you all for joining, and hope to see you guys on Thursday. We do realize it is the day before the holiday weekend starts. Hopefully everybody has all of their fingers. No firework incidents, but please do join on Thursday for the advanced training if you have the time. If you don't, you can still register, and we will certainly send you a recording after the training wraps up. Thanks, everybody, and have a great Tuesday.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
I intend to keep all my fingers on July 4th. All fireworks are banned in Utah.